Welcome, welcome.
Hey there.
Welcome to the webinar. Stop the PRGT pipeline, stand up to Trump. I'm assuming you guys can't hear the beeping that is happening. Good, okay. Yeah, so tonight's webinar, Stop the PRGT pipeline, stand up to Trump. As I'm sure you're all too aware of, Donald Trump is the president now. And stopping this pipeline is a concrete thing we can do to actually diminish his power, which you'll all learn about tonight. We're going to give folks a few minutes to trickle in here. Just a note that we are recording this. And while we wait, feel free to drop in your name in the chat, where you're calling in from, who your favorite character on Severance is, if you're not watching Severance, what your favorite season of White Lotus is. If you're not watching either of those things, just drop a TV show that you like, because rest is important in this movement. And we need to turn off our brains sometimes and watch some really good TV or really bad TV. Welcome everyone to people joining in. We're going to start shortly. Encourage folks to introduce yourself in the chat, drop where you're calling in from, a TV show that you like. If you don't watch TV, that's cool. Your brain must be far less addled than mine. That's awesome. Helly is amazing. My favorite character on Severance is Irving, and my favorite season of White Lotus is season 1. Mainly because of Murray Bartlett's world-class performance as the hotel manager. It is incredible. Welcome, everyone. We've got lots of folks here tonight, which is very exciting. People calling in from Surrey, Valemount, Winnipeg, Victoria, Kitts, Salt Spring. My grandma lives on Salt Spring. Yeah, okay. I think we're gonna get this started. Keep introducing yourselves in the chat. Someone likes Al Jazeera. That's their favorite show. That's not a show, but I respect it. My grandma's not. Her name is Sarah Matheson, but it is a small place. Maybe you know her, Andrea. Okay, it's 5:33. We're gonna get this started. So hello again. We have lots of people here tonight. It's really exciting. My name's Molly. I'm going to be your host. I am the comms coordinator at Dogwood. I'm calling in tonight from the place that's presently known as Vancouver, where the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam have lived for millennia. None of these nations ever signed a treaty to cede their territory, and all three continue to assert their sovereignty and practice their culture on their land. The Tsleil-Waututh are actually reviving shellfish habitat in their Burrard Inlet. The Squamish are building Sinnock, which is an apartment complex near Granville Island. That'll include several low-income housing floors to address the housing crisis. And the Musqueam are also involved in their own affordable housing project at Jericho Lands, which is an old Navy base in Kitsilano. There is almost certainly a very rad Indigenous-led project happening in your own area. I encourage you to find it, amplify it, and support it in whatever way you can. So joining me tonight, we have Janelle Lapointe. She's the Senior Advisor in Indigenous Strategy at the David Suzuki Foundation. And we also have Kai Nagata, who's the Northern Pipelines and LNG campaigner at Dogwood. Tonight, you guys are going to hear the latest about the Prince Rupert Gas Transmission Pipeline, or PRGT. You're going to learn about the billionaire Republican megadonors with very close ties to Donald Trump who are behind this pipeline. You're going to learn about the people on the ground who are fighting this thing. And you're going to learn about how the truly insane political moment we are in actually offers us the best chance at stopping PRGT in its tracks. And of course, you're going to learn about actions you can take in your own community to help stop this pipeline. The call tonight is going to be an hour and a half long. Our speakers will provide info up top, and then we're going to have time in smaller groups to learn about action opportunities you can take where you live. Please drop any questions you have at any time in the chat because we're going to have an audience Q&A session between the speaker section and breakout groups. And with that, I am pleased to introduce my colleague, Kai Nagata. Kai is a former journalist who spent the last decade at Dogwood investigating the oil and gas industry in BC. Kai lives on Gitxsan territory, directly in the path of the PRGT pipeline. Today, he's calling in from Prince George to give us the state of play on this project. Take it away, Kai.
Hi, Molly. Hi, Janelle. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Well, it's been quite a day. Hello. I'm at the Prince George Hospital. One of the land defenders who was integral to the PRGT blockade last fall just had an operation yesterday. He's doing well, but yeah, it's been pretty full on. There's been a team of us here supporting him through the surgery. So PRGT, just to catch people up who might be new to the issue or learning about it through the trade war and all the Trump craziness, PRGT was proposed back in 2014, and it is, I would call it the last of the dinosaurs. It's the last of these huge mega projects that were proposed in a big cluster about 10 years ago. Back when there was a little bit more of a business case for LNG, and we didn't know as much as we do now about the economics and about the just how mind-bogglingly bad these terminals are for the climate. So we'll get to all that, but yeah, 10 years ago, a company called TC Energy, which you might remember from the Keystone XL pipeline and Coastal GasLink, they proposed PRGT, and of course it was a rubber stamp. This was under the Christy Clark government, under the old Environmental Assessment Act, and they got the green light, and then they never did anything for 10 years. So last summer, the project suddenly came roaring back out of dormancy, and we saw a flurry of legal actions and blockades as they started doing a limited amount of construction down in the Nass Valley. So that was August, September, October, and a little bit of November. And then after that construction program, we got news through the terminal, Xilisms, that they just scored major investment from a group of Wall Street firms. And so the biggest one is called Blackstone. It is the largest alternative asset manager in the world. They have $1 trillion in assets under management. That means companies and real estate that they own. And their CEO is this guy named Steve Schwartzman, who is a major donor to the Republicans and a close advisor to Donald Trump since 2016. And he is one of those Wall Street guys who profited enormously off of the housing crisis back in 2008. If you're old enough to remember the last big Wall Street bubble and financial crash, it's the same people. And another firm that's involved is called Apollo Global Management. Their CEO, Mark Rowan, was considered by Trump. He was shortlisted for Treasury Secretary in this administration and decided he could make more money in the private sector. But that's who we're dealing with. It's the absolute upper echelons of the American financial industry. And they see an opportunity to make a ton of money off of LNG. And the reason is because the prices in North America are lower than the prices in Asia at the moment for methane gas. And so if you can connect those markets through a pipeline and tankers, then there's a huge arbitrage opportunity, right? Buy low, sell high. So that's the motivation. That's why it's Wall Street companies that are proposing these terminals. And BC is just one piece of a much bigger picture. We have to understand that it's not because we're so special and deserving that Wall Street has chosen to come invest in British Columbia. It's because they have a much wider strategy. When you hear Donald Trump say drill baby drill, they are trying to push gas into the Pacific from all over the continent, from the terminals on the Gulf Coast through the Panama Canal through pipelines to Mexico and new terminals on the Mexican coast, through a brand new terminal in Alaska. And BC is just one of those places where American companies see this opportunity to push gas into the Pacific. The end game, if they are successful in building any number of these terminals, is to essentially create new customers for gas in the Pacific. And so we'll talk about this tonight, but there is no market in the established industrialized economies in Asia. I was just in Japan and Korea with Gixan and with Zodan leaders, talking to investors in LNG Canada and learning more about the markets over there. And demand is actually falling in these key markets for LNG. And so instead, what they're trying to do is get a bunch of developing countries hooked on burning gas for electricity rather than switching straight to renewables. And they hope that by flooding the market with supply, pushing that price down, and trying to undercut renewable technology, that they can delay the transition to renewable energy by a few years and make a few more $1 billion. And so what we're seeing is this bubble as the market gets pumped up by figures like Donald Trump. And every time he says drill, baby, drill, it's a signal to investors that the US government and the financial industry are behind this industry and that it's an opportunity, right? These markets work on confidence, and that confidence can be manufactured by a powerful salesman like Trump, and that's what they're counting on. However, there are these huge downsides. And, we just published this last week, but the BC government predicts that as soon as the first LNG terminal is online later this summer, that we're going to be paying double the price for natural gas in BC. And so that's going to push bills up, not just for households, but for ferries and farmers and warehouses and community centers and anybody that burns gas to heat water or to heat space. And that is going to be passed on to customers. Even if you have switched off your gas furnace and your gas stove and you're not a Fortis customer, you're still going to be paying higher prices because those higher costs get passed down to consumers all the way through the economy. And so there's major economic downsides for businesses and for people in BC. And then there's major climate downsides. What we're discovering is that when you put gas on a boat and you ship it across the world, so much of it leaks out that it actually makes that product worse than coal when you look at the life cycle emissions. And what I mean is that you add up all the methane leakage from fracking, from putting it through a pipeline, loading it onto a boat, sailing across the ocean, and then regasifying it and shipping it to customers in those eventual destination markets. And the overall methane emissions, the leakage, makes natural gas worse than coal. So it depends on the transport distance, but that's the picture that's emerging. And so this whole idea that this is a climate solution is a total fabrication. And it's being used as a distraction from the real motivation, which of course, as always, is to just make a boatload of money. And so we have this opportunity now, I think, with people's attention focused on Trump, on his attempt to take over of natural resources in Canada, on the dark world of big money behind the mega project, and all of these billionaires, unelected oligarchs that are essentially taking over the American government and trying to extend that control outward. And every time Trump talks about, Canada becoming the 51st state, what their agenda really is to control the resources and the transportation corridors. They don't have to actually, roll tanks across the 49th parallel or take over the legislature with soldiers. They can use those billions and trillions of dollars to take over these key nodes of our economy and to start to manipulate the price for gas in the Pacific by controlling that supply. And so we're already seeing Wall Street firms, making huge profits off of BC gas while we collect the crumbs basically and try to plug the holes in our own failing social safety net with that little bit of revenue from gas royalties. So lots of reasons to oppose this thing, but the fact that PRGT is owned by an American private equity firm, and same thing is true for Coastal GasLink. I think people are starting to get the picture of exactly who benefits from these projects, and we're also getting a pretty good sense of how to stop them because of the energy in Canada right now towards not handing over control of our energy and our resources to American billionaires, to the inner circle around Donald Trump. And so, yeah, that's what I want to talk about tonight. There's lots of grassroots opposition on the ground, which you might not have heard so much about down south. But I'll just share one important puzzle piece that I think we need to understand in terms of the timing around this project, and that is that the government says they're going to fast track new LNG projects, and um, there's a pressure from the company and their lobbyists to try to restart construction on PRGT as soon as possible, and they want an approval for the terminal by end of March. So that's why we're putting on this big push this month. But there's increasing opposition from the Gitgat, from the Lachwalams, from Metlakatla, from the Gitnyao, from the Kispiox Band of the Giksan, and we have seen multiple lawsuits launched since this project reared its head again in the fall, and those hearings are ongoing this spring with another case going to court later this month. There's also 3 nations that I mentioned that are in arbitration now with the Environmental Assessment Office, and that's because their concerns have been totally ignored in the approval process for Ksilisms. So we're starting to see mounting pressure from the nations along the pipeline and tanker route. We are seeing extremely committed groups of land defenders in Giksan and Gitnyao territory who blocked construction traffic last fall and have now declared an Indigenous protected area on the pipeline route, and they're vowing to enforce that and defend their territory. And we're seeing markets in Asia increasingly skeptical of these LNG projects in North America because of the spiraling cost overruns. And so we can talk about all of those elements, but now is really not a time to be pushing blindly forward with these American-owned gas projects. We need to be pausing and thinking about the economic implications, the implications for Indigenous rights, and the motivations of these Wall Street billionaires in not just proposing these projects, but trying to pass ownership off to small communities in the north. So I'm hoping Janelle can pick up that theme and tell us more about how this operates on the ground. But that's an overview of PRGT that hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of why we've put so much energy into trying to expose the companies behind it and the opportunity that we have this spring.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kai. Thank you for that clear breakdown from your car outside the hospital in Prince George and for all the work you're doing. Okay, we're going to hear from Janelle Lapointe now. Janelle is a climate justice and Indigenous rights organizer from Tsilatin First Nation. She's currently a senior advisor at the David Suzuki Foundation and a guest on Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam territories. She leans on her lived experience growing up on her small reserve in northern British Columbia to ensure that intersectionality is at the forefront of environmental narratives to build power and help others see their stake in fighting back against the status quo. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Janelle. Over to you.
Senhungzu, Hadit Sien, Spuzi, Janelle Point, Onat Janelle, Staten Inkez Laksayu Asli, Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Etwatsi, Kansen, Tedeschi, and Slew, Michelle Baker, Spa, Renee Lapointe, Inlay, Tatsu, Inkez, Satsien, Emma Baker, Inkez, Willie Baker, Inlay. Hello, folks. As Molly introduced, my name's Janelle. I am from a small community in northern BC called Stella, but I'm calling in today from the beautiful unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And I just introduced my parents and my matrimonial grandparents as part of protocol in my language. This is the second webinar I've done where Kai's been calling in from his vehicle. I feel inspired. And I am on the tail end of a cold and my nose is running, so excuse my sniffles. I may have to be a bit gross and blow my nose partway through this. But yes, me being sick is not as gross as billionaires. Am I right? Um, yeah, I got to grow up in my village, Stella. For folks that don't know where that is, it's a couple hours west of Prince George, a really small community. Kai will drive by it on his way back from the hospital to get sand territory. And I'm super proud of where I'm from. My grandmother, Emma, was born right on the the Stelaco River. And her parents were living and tending to those lands long before the reserve was put in that location. So I feel a deep connection to the territory. I think it's beautiful, and I don't take for granted what it was like and what it meant to grow up connected to my matrilineal culture and language like that. When settlers first came to my community, there's dozens and dozens of records about how beautiful and abundant the lands. There's recordings about just how many animals, how vast the forests were, and how rich the people and the culture were. And we had our traditional hereditary governance system where our leaders were considered good chiefs if they were able to come to our governance tables with not only resources for their clans. I sit in Luxilliu clan, Caribou clan, but enough for one another. Um, so that's what I'm really proud of. And because I come from a really abundant place, that means I also come from a community that is no stranger to boom and bust industries. Corporations have always been lined up to make their buck off of our lands and our waterways, and industry time and time again has come and gone, leaving behind environmental damage and empty promises, whether it's logging, mining, oil and gas. The pattern has been the same. These profits flow out while the costs stay with us. With the industries booming, we see those temporary jobs, we see those community sponsorships, the money flowing. And when the bus comes, our communities pick up the pieces. We've dealt with things like contaminated water from the mining industry, depleted resources, and a tinderbox forest from the forestry practices in this province, job insecurity, climate vulnerability, and just a new generation that's left to go to the next extractive industry in order to survive. And so now LNG is being sold to us as the next big opportunity, but I've seen this before, even though in my short lifetime, I've seen this before. We know who gets rich and we know who gets left behind. And we also know that the oil and gas industries are masters of manipulation. They're experts in manufacturing public opinion to serve their own interests. This isn't the first time they've rewritten a narrative to protect their bottom line. Decades ago, we now know that they knew about climate change and they had the science and the research and proof that their industry was going to drive global catastrophe. And instead of taking responsibility, they covered it up. They spent billions on disinformation campaigns, on lobbying politicians, funding fake research, and misleading the public in order to keep their product flowing. And now that we're living in the era of the climate crisis, and now that public awareness on Indigenous rights and title and the true history of this country are starting to come to the forefront, and Indigenous nations now have political power, they very cunningly have shifted strategies again. So instead of denying the problem, they're repackaging the same industry under the language of progress, saying that, natural gas is a green product. and that their industry is delivering something called economic reconciliation. You may have heard this term. I know when I first heard it, I thought, wow, economic reconciliation, that sounds really interesting, really awesome. Because when I think about economic reconciliation, I think it means returning to our traditional land-based economies. I think about, yeah, a time where wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the health of waters and strength of our communities, like our traditional governance system says. Um, I think it also means innovation, getting to use the thousands and thousands of years of Indigenous science and governance to lead this broken, fragile Canadian economy into something new, something that doesn't rely on extraction, and, breaking free from that boom and bust cycle and putting power back into the hands of our people. And, let's be honest, I don't think the economy is working for most Canadians. Most of us can't afford groceries. We're in an affordability crisis while billionaires make record profits. So I'm ashamed that a concept as important as reconciliation has been misused as a guise for financial and political entrapment and has been meant to mean partnerships in this industry. And I continually ask myself, like, why would industry just be so generous in just handing First Nations these projects? I mean, if industry and governments really did have a change of hearts and were suddenly about sharing wealth and uplifting communities, I think we would see a very generous wealth tax. I think we'd see fair wages, and we would see corporations actually paying for the cleanup of their mess, paying their fair share for hospitals and schools and critical infrastructure. But that's not what's happening, right? So why is it that industry is so intent on First Nations ownership? Well, we now know that global LNG demand is set to peak by 2030. That is a few years away. We also know that the last major pipeline project ran over 100% over budget. And so investors are really running from these projects. They are not willing to take the financial risk anymore. And so who does industry turn to? Well, Indigenous nations. They're asking First Nations to take ownership in LNG because it offloads the financial risk. If the project fails, if the market changes, or project costs run over, the First Nations are the ones who are stuck with the debt instead of the corporations and their investors. It provides a political cover. When these nations buy in, governments and industry are able to claim Indigenous consent and silent opposition. I mean, couldn't count how many times I've spoken up against the industry only to be shown that my own nation supports these projects on paper. That is the whole tactic. And it locks in LNG expansion. Once these First Nations take out these massive loans, they can't afford to walk away from these projects, even if there is environmental damage and these projects begin to harm their own land. And the federal government now has even introduced the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program and are encouraging nations to take out billions in LNG related debt. So if LNG is such a great investment, why wouldn't these companies just fund it themselves? I've seen yeah, numerous tactics on how these industries are securing Indigenous buy-in. One is the classic uh, divide and conquer strategy where they bypass hereditary leadership, they pressure band councils, they use industry-funded coalitions or spokespeople in order to silence opposition and secure agreements that prevent open discussion and even prevent members from speaking up against these projects. And when the opposition arises, they pit communities against each other. We're already seeing this tactic as the Gitineau and Gitxsan take a stand for their land. They're really exploiting the manufactured poverty that Indigenous communities have been put in. We've been underfunded and denied clean water, roads, healthcare, basic infrastructure, and industry comes in and acts like they're the only way out. And they've, really filled a funding gap where government has failed. I know that these industries have had a huge presence in my community, not just through the project itself, but through direct funding of critical services. They've funded water treatment centers, language programs, health centers, education, community events, uh, in many ways, infrastructure that the government should have already delivered on. And this puts communities in a really compromised position because if industry is the one providing the services, then walking away from the project isn't just about rejecting LNG, it's saying no to these critical services and infrastructure. They've continuously overpromised jobs that don't exist. I know LNG Canada has claimed they would create 10,000 jobs, but 75% of those on the last project went to out-of-province workers, and there's often not long-term sustainable jobs given to Indigenous communities. And they, yeah, are really co-opting language like economic sovereignty, like self-determination, trying to make us more dependent on fossil fuel revenues. And yeah, I think they really manufacture a sense that these projects are inevitable. In my community, because we are such a small nation, there is a strong sense that if we don't say yes, it's just going to happen without us. And that's not an unbased fear. We've seen it time and time again. And even on this project, I know when I first started hearing about PRGT, it was right before my community had its consultation on the project. And so I was really excited that I had the opportunity to attend my community consultation, ask these questions. And yeah, I found that a lot of my members were also against the project. They were worried about not having proper First Nations-led environmental assessments, worried about the damage to our already compromised land and waterway. But then, literally the same week, I found out that the construction for the right-of-way was already happening in communities to the east of us. So, what message does that send? It really shows that our consent is just a formality and that they're going to go ahead with these projects, whether we agree or not. So yeah, now we have this new added layer with Donald Trump threatening these tariffs on Canadian energy. And I was disappointed that in the face of that, the province did not fight back and invest in energy sovereignty. Instead, they are using a tactic of trying to fast track these LNG and mining projects instead. And we know Kai pointed out very clearly why that is. It's because Trump's allies are deeply invested in BC LNG, and that risks, the government handing our energy future to Trump's inner circle. This province was one of the first jurisdictions in Canada to pass DRIPA, the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, in 2019. And that was supposed to ensure that Indigenous consent was always required, not just considered in major resource projects. But yet here we are 5 years later, blowing past those principles in favor of fast tracking those projects. And what that means now is that if a nation opposes these projects, their options are to risk their bodies, their physical well-being on the front lines, or to spend countless dollars and a lot of time in these lengthy legal battles, like the Gitxsan and the Gittinyao are doing, which we should all be endlessly grateful for, but they shouldn't have to when we already have precedent like DRIPA or like the Supreme Court case of Delgamuukw. When a nation needs a new environmental assessment, the project can now get rubber stamped with these outdated approvals. And when nations want to lean into a different energy alternative and really focus on renewables, those projects are often delayed, underfunded, or drowned in bureaucracy. And so this sends a message that the province is willing to move mountains for LNG, but not for what I think would be the true essence of economic reconciliation, which is for us to reclaim our traditional economies and be part of economic innovation. So we really need to pay attention to those tactics and ensure that the rights and title of Indigenous people are always applied in full force, not just when it's convenient for industry, and call out these instances of colonialism disguised as partnerships. Um, yeah, we also know now that because we're in an energy shortage and we rely on hydro, but we're in a climate chaos caused drought in this province. BC is really trying to diversify their energy by building and hydro wind and projects, but not to power homes or to make lives better for British Columbians, but to make LNG cheaper. BC Hydro is already taking on debt to build wind farms for LNG exports. Gas rates, as Kai mentioned, are already rising because of LNG. And meanwhile, we already subsidize the LNG industry in the millions and allow LNG Canada to pay a discounted rate. So we're really in danger of the government essentially breaking BC Hydro in order to subsidize fossil fuel exports. And I joined this organization called 7Gen Energy, which is an Indigenous-led organization that's all about empowering Indigenous youth to drive clean energy transitions in their communities. And I joined that group and started learning more about renewables because I was tired of fighting against things and really wanted to focus on what I'm fighting for. And I'm so inspired by all the Indigenous people, not just in BC, but coast to coast to coast, that are building infrastructure and these new economies that align with our values, our knowledge, and our rights, and proving that we're not just stakeholders in energy, but we can be leaders in it. And right now, my community has been awarded an Indigenous-owned wind project as part of the province's recent Call to Power. And this is really exciting. My community is really proud of this project, and it gives me a glimpse into the future we should be fighting for, one where wind and solar can power homes and heat pumps and electric buses, where we can have affordable electricity that actually benefits communities, and that we can have energy sovereignty that weakens these Trump-aligned petro billionaires. And so that puts us at a crossroads. We have a choice right now. We either get to use clean energy to lift up communities, we can implement community-led renewable energy solutions that will make everyone in this province, not just Indigenous people, more resilient to climate threats, to these trade wars, and to provide a affordable electricity option, or we can use it to prop up these LNG mega projects that enrich American billionaires. So, yeah, the province is breaking its energy system to serve LNG, not BC, but it doesn't have to be this way. We have the power to fight for a future where clean, Indigenous-owned, community-led energy can serve us as British Columbians, not foreign billionaires. And we can make it happen. Like Kai said, I think we're in this really key moment. We have this window to make a difference. And so I'm really grateful that we have the space here today to take advantage of this opportunity and hopefully win that future that I'm really excited about. Yeah, I'll say that's it. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Janelle. That was great. It was so hopeful. And it's so important to zoom out and speak the much needed truth about the totally disingenuous and dangerous narrative, the economic reconciliation narrative that the conservatives are peddling. And also, your earrings are incredible. That brings us to the end of our speaker portion tonight. So huge thank you to Janelle and Kai for sharing your expertise and insights. We're going to take about 10 minutes to do audience questions. We've been compiling those in a doc, so I'm just going to pull that up. This first question is for Kai. It's from Roger. Can you note the link between Mark Carney, Blackstone, and Brookfield, who are mostly oil and gas based, and Mark's position there versus his talk about renewables?
Yeah, Brookfield is a major investor in oil and gas companies. However, I haven't found a link between Brookfield and Blackstone. There's a really confusing thing on Wall Street where they have BlackRock and Blackstone, two massive investment firms with very similar names. They did have a common origin at one point, but they split off. And so BlackRock is not Blackstone. They are in the same industry. They share some personnel, but I don't know of a link between Mark Carney and Blackstone or PRGT. I did want to say one more thing about the billionaires after hearing Janelle's presentation, because the 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 crossroads is so stark between the world that Janelle's describing and the vision that the BC government seems to be implementing so far on autopilot. And I just want to point out again the link between the housing crash in 2008, which was caused by these financial corporations giving mortgages to people who should not have been borrowing that amount of money at those interest rates. And we are in a situation again where they are trying to force these communities to take out massive loans to build infrastructure that has a 25 or 30-year payback period and no future. And so it is literally the same playbook. It's just like on a much larger scale. And the financial consequences for the borrowers, for the communities, are going to be every bit as devastating as that 2008 financial crash. And so this idea of like forcing people to borrow money to build things that are just massively overvalued assets that are going to be underwater in a few years, either literally because of climate change or financially because they can't generate enough revenue to pay off their loans. That is the predatory business model of this industry, and the idea of letting those guys in order to try to shape our economy in BC is just sickening. So thank you, Janelle, for making the stakes so clear.
Thank you, Kai, for that answer. This is for Janelle. This is a quick one. Is there a way people can contribute or, quote, invest in 7Gen, please, even if it's small amounts by many people?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Right now we're in a bit of a strategic planning phase, redistributing what's most needed for the 7Gen project. But I would just recommend following the website and the social projects because we work with partners such as Indigenous Clean Energy and also some local youth that have been through various incubation programs, and we're always sharing, yeah, requests for funding for specific projects. Or we also do a yearly annual conference where we convene these youth together. This year we did it in Iqaluit, and I was just blown away by uh, yeah, the hundreds of youth that came together. And, a lot of them don't have formal training or education in environmental or clean energy, but just leaning on their community knowledge and experience, they were like able to articulate a vision for a just transition, honestly, like way stronger than I sometimes see it in climate spaces. So, yeah, I'm glad you're as excited as I am about uplifting those voices. I would just recommend following on social or following along on the website.
Okay, sweet. Thank you. Maybe we can drop those links in the chat. And this is kind of related to the question that was just asked, and you sort of answered it, but how do we inspire youth in the ongoing protest of an extractive industry? That's also for you, Janelle.
Yeah, like I said, I think if you give space for youth to convene and dream and lead, they have that in them. So I think just continuously make space for those voices to be heard. But yeah, I know as someone that came into this fight fighting against these major projects, it is yeah, takes a real toll on people's mind and body, and we shouldn't be offloading that completely to the Indigenous youth that are willing to stand up for that. So make space for them, but also we need to find ways to stand alongside these communities.
Yeah.
Not to put anyone on the spot, but I saw Jen and Drew log in for back home in Gixan territory. there's some amazing young organizers who are um, really helping to keep that ember alive. The Gixan Firekeepers, the Lachiap youth on Instagram have been incredible. And I'll just say, like, the thing that is like um, at a personal level most exciting to me about this work is creating opportunities for young people to get out and learn on the land.
Mm.
And in a world that's in crisis, in a world where we're told that like everything is dying and everything is burning and everything is like screwed, there's nothing more important than going out and like soaking up that love from the territory. And um, teachers like Big Al and Deb Good and Gitnyao and um, the folks who have really like stepped up through these land defense actions, they're creating these opportunities for intergenerational knowledge sharing and for people to actually get out on the territory. Yes, in the path of a destructive project, but um, that is where that love for the land comes through. And so, yeah, anything you can do to support organizations like the Firekeepers in Gixan territory, the Ganeda clan in Gitniao who are blockading on the Cranberry. Those are the spaces where we see some of the most amazing youth engagement happening, and it's lifelong.
Yeah, plus one to that. As someone who's been up to the territory, it's literally magic. And also support Teresa Brown's dog sanctuary. She's building a dog sanctuary on the path of the pipeline. Like this is the kind of work that's happening up there. It's incredible. Maybe we have time for one more. I'll pose this one to Kai. Um, Sorry. Okay. In Nijka territory, they put in temporary structures just to have just to get past the government. I'm not really. Do we think they're going to continue increasing traffic in the area? So, again,
Yes.
maybe talking about the impacts to Nijka territory and all the increased traffic.
Yes, let me address that, and thank you, Sylvia, for highlighting those local impacts in the Nass Valley. So what we saw last fall was all these white trucks buzzing around, heavy equipment pushing dirt, and all of this propaganda from the pipeline company saying, "We're off and running, folks. This is happening. We're building this thing." And a lot of people saw that, and it was a huge surprise. Um, and it's also really demoralizing because it feels like, oh shoot, like the train's out of the station. I guess this is happening. And what that was a very clever attempt to exploit a loophole in BC's environmental assessment laws. And it's the only way legally for this project to stay alive, uh, because as I mentioned, it was approved more than 10 years ago. And so the environmental certificate for PRGT actually expired in November. And so what would be required to move forward with the project is for the BC government to actually revive that environmental assessment certificate. In other words, bend over backwards for these American billionaires in order to revive a dead project so that it can continue. And so that was the game in Nisga'a territory last fall, was to try to get enough right-of-way cut that they could argue that this is substantially started. And if they can argue that, then the BC government can give them the green light in order to go seek investment and loans to continue construction. So what those American billionaires did, I mean, it's just like the change they found in the couch cushions, right? It's like a couple $100 million. It's nothing to companies this size, but what it did was open the door to a loophole from the BC government to allow them to revive this dead project, which was approved, let me remind you, under the old version of BC's environmental assessment laws. Anyway, that's where a lot of the legal friction is coming from. That's where the challenges from the communities are coming from, because it's totally unfair and it's obvious that they're trying to game the system. But that's what was happening on Nisga'a territory. And in order for construction to continue, they would need to get billions and billions of dollars in cash, either from banks or from pension funds, usually. And that's what would be required to reach a final investment decision. So they're counting on the BC government to greenlight the pipeline and approve the terminal so that they can go to banks and try to borrow billions and billions of dollars. And that is what would trigger the continuation of construction, but that hasn't happened yet. And we have a really golden opportunity in the next few weeks to stop the BC government from granting that loophole.
Great. Thank you, Kai. I have one more quick question because I think this is a really important piece of it. Either one of you can answer this. Donna Grace Campbell says that they have a friend on the, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, the Laxgaltsap Village Council, so Nijga. And this friend says that 80% of Nijga are in support of the pipeline. Has anyone addressed the Nijga directly? What kind of resistance are we seeing on that front, if any?
I can speak to that just from time spent in the Nass Valley, and Janelle, if you wanted to jump in too to talk about that 80% number. I mean, let me tell you for a moment about the Nass Valley. And this is a place that has no bus stop, no library, no grocery store, but where these American companies want to build a $55 billion LNG export terminal and pipeline through the sacred lava beds that buried thousands of Nisga'a people a couple hundred years ago in a volcanic eruption. It is a project which is on its face totally inappropriate for that part of the world, which has been otherwise largely left intact from industrial development. However, there's also no newspapers. There's no critical analysis. There's no public forum. There's no place in which to have this conversation. And in that vacuum, the company has made great strides in convincing everybody that this is the answer to all their problems, that everyone's going to get rich. And I can't fault a single Nisga'a person for supporting this project, but I can provide a couple of facts which are left out by the company. Number one is that the Nisga'a have no ownership stake in the terminal. So when this is described as an Indigenous-led project or an Indigenous-owned project, that is just factually incorrect. They would be essentially the landlords because the Nisga'a treaty government owns a little rectangle of private property on the island where the terminal would sit. And so they would collect revenues from rent, but they don't have an ownership stake in the project. And when it comes to PRGT, we don't know what the equity stake is for the Nisga'a treaty government, but we know who they are dealing with, and these guys play to win. Blackstone, Apollo, they're not in the business of giving away money. And so the Nisga'a are important to securing loan guarantees from government and in terms of branding and marketing this project, but they have no ownership stake in the terminal. And on the pipeline front, yeah, maybe Janelle, you can speak to some of the motivations of elected governments in pursuing these projects. But the bottom line is that an elected treaty government and a Wall Street corporation do not get to make decisions on behalf of everybody along the pipeline and tanker route. And we are seeing a lot of opposition and a lot of skepticism, both in Nisga'a territory and on either side of it, that is also important and has to be taken into consideration before the government makes future decisions on this project.
Yeah, I guess to speak of my own community's experience with the last project, Coastal GasLink, I mean, we were, like I said, one of the many nations who was shown back to me as, do you not support these communities if you oppose Coastal GasLink? And I knew that the truth behind my community being a yes on paper was that we had a very small community consultation that not many members showed up to. And then the band council did a yes. And band councils are only supposed to be responsible for, reserve lands, which are often 2% or less of the entire territories that, are unceded and that we should be titles holders for. But yeah, I think what Kai said is exactly right. Like, people's support for these projects are because they're put in desperate circumstances where they don't have critical infrastructure, where work is really precarious, and they're trying to feed their family like the rest of us. And what I experienced is after Coastal GasLink was being constructed through my territory, the community members who were working on that project and who may have voted yes to the project were constantly coming up to me and whispering information about how disgusted they were with how they've been drilling under the river, how they were operating in conditions that no other industry would be able to operate in, how they were cutting corners. Lots of community reports worried about the amount of men that were being brought into the community. Like I said, most of those jobs go out to out of province workers, and they're put in man camps close to our communities, and that, yeah, made it a really scary place to live for mothers and fathers and people that had teenage children, especially on Highway 16, where Indigenous women and girls have been going missing and found murdered for decades. So yeah, I have a lot of empathy for the people that are supporting the projects because they don't have all of the information, and these industries make a huge effort. They have full salaried Indigenous engagement people whose full-time job is just to give the wrong information to these community members and make it sound like it's a really, really good deal. And so I think that's important for folks that are concerned about climate to think about, you know, we also haven't been showing up for northern communities. We often don't know or care about their material circumstances. And yeah, the reality is there isn't a lot of economic opportunity. There isn't, in some cases, clean drinking water, grocery stores, healthcare. And so I think as we're calling for a stop to these projects, we also need to call on some government action to reparate some of the wealth that's already been stolen to these lands so that we don't need to say yes to projects in order to get infrastructure that we need and deserve.
Retweet. Thank you, Janelle. And thank you, Kai, for your answers to the questions. And thank you for the questions. We are going to move on now. We're going to move on to the breakout room portion of this webinar. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Paige, who's going to share some information about the PRGT month of action that is underway.
All right. Thanks so much, Molly. And hello, folks. Good evening. My name is Paige Gorsak, and I'm a staff organizer at Dogwood. And I'm also based in Vancouver on Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory. And I'm here to share with you the plan for what we can all do this month to help stop PRGT. And of course, I want to start off by saying a huge thank you to Kai and Janelle for all of that powerful context. Like, it's so clear from what you both shared that we are at a really critical juncture in BC's history. And yeah, this pipeline, you know, every pipeline is a problem, but really you helped show that this is not just an isolated issue. It is part of this broader, more troubling pattern where Wall Street, private equity firms with direct ties to Trump, who are more concerned with their profits than the well-being of people here, are coming in to the picture and who are co-opting reconciliation to get their way. And it's just something that we need to stop, in addition to all the other reasons that we might have for fighting a pipeline. We are in this very odd, specific context right now. And what I'm going to do with that is share with you what we can do about it. So I'm going to toss up some slides because I want to talk to you about this opportunity. Kai got into this a little bit, that right now the BC government is mulling this decision about whether to renew, to extend PRGT's environmental assessment certificate. And they are planning to make that decision sometime this spring. So in March or April. We don't know exactly the timeline, but we know that it's happening now. And what I want to highlight, you know, before I get into exactly the tactics, is that there is huge opposition. So Kai outlined some of this already. Janelle did as well. The many Indigenous nations whose territory lies along the pipeline route, where folks have been active and vocal, from community meetings to lawsuits to physical blockades. But that opposition actually extends across BC and across Canada. So some recent polling came out that I wanted to show you all, polling, kind of nerdy, but it shows that British Columbians oppose fast-tracking PRGT by a margin of 2-1. And even across Canada, there is that same opposition. So specifically, 80% of Canadians oppose American companies having a greater ownership of resource projects in Canada. That's huge. That means that, you know, it's not just the environmental movement, it is a broad swath of Canadians who are rightly frustrated when they see our government trying to give away our energy resources to these foreign investors who have no stake in our province's future. And I think it's really important that we name that right now, because in this moment of a border crisis and Trump's tariffs, we're going to hear the opposite narrative about this pipeline. I'm sure some folks on the call have read Naomi Klein's work about disaster capitalism and how in times of crisis, powerful corporations will exploit that moment to try and push through projects, work with governments to push through policies that otherwise wouldn't make any sense. And I know that Trump and his tariffs are not a natural disaster, but they are absolutely a crisis where we are seeing folks trying to say that PRGT, you know, this Canadian pipeline will benefit BC and support our economy. And all of us, we need to be vigilant and clear about how that just isn't true, right? So I want to share a powerful example, which is that just last week, the new provincial budget came out and it revealed something shocking, that LNG Canada, when it comes online, is going to double domestic gas prices this year. So that means higher costs for households and businesses across BC. And that is only going to continue to go up and keep happening if our province continues to build more LNG terminals. So people in BC get to pay the costs of projects that are primarily going to benefit billionaires and private equity firms, and in a most likely circumstance, leave Northern First Nations to clean up the mess when they leave. So we are seeing a cost of living crisis that is not just, driven by the global economy and inflation, but more specifically in choices being made by our provincial government. And I'm really grateful that we had, Janelle, that we had you on the call tonight to help us see that this isn't the only future that's possible for BC, that instead we can chart a different path forward, one where we are investing in renewable energy, where Indigenous communities are leading the way. We're investing in good green jobs that protect the land and safeguard our future. This is what we are fighting for, and why we're really grateful to have all of you on the call tonight. But of course, what does that mean right now? It means that we have this window of opportunity and we need to seize it. So the decisions about PRGT and LNG Canada and domestic gas prices, none of this is inevitable. Sometimes it can feel that way, but they're being made by our political leaders. And this month we can do our part to hold them accountable and protect our communities. So what does it look like? Our strategy this month is simple but powerful. We need to get as many people in BC as possible, putting pressure on Premier David Eby, Minister of Energy, Adrian Dix, and the Minister of the Environment, Tamara Davidson. And actually, while we're at it, we can throw on the rest of Cabinet. These are the folks who are going to be at the decision table talking about PRGT's environmental assessment certificate and whether to move it forward. And right now, they are hearing from folks that a pipeline is a good idea, that it's a good economic investment, when we all know that actually this is going to shore up billionaires from America. This is going to be a good thing for Donald Trump and a really terrible thing for our communities and for our climate. So we need to take this month to ensure that these folks know that British Columbians are watching and that we won't let a border crisis or anything else give them the cover to fast track a pipeline and trample on Indigenous rights. So what does it mean? What does it look like for us to show them that we are watching? We need active support. So not just shouting at our TVs or our phones or posting online. or, moaning about it, at the dinner table to our families. Don't get me wrong, those are all crucial parts of our lives. And I've certainly done all of it in the last month. But what we want to do is move that concern into action that is directly going to reach those decision makers. So in addition to that, pointing our energy at them, we also need to build the active support among our friends and our family. Tonight, how many of us are there on the call? 200? That's great. That's incredible. But with only 200 of us, they're not going to hear us. But what if we were to welcome all of our other friends and family that we know are activated right now, who are getting political, who are speaking out online, who are buying Canadian? There is an entire pool of our network that we can tap to take action with us on PRGT right now that we might not be able to usually. So climate doesn't always filter through to people's lived experience or to what they care about politically. Right now, there is this incredible Venn diagram where those folks are being pulled in. And that's what we need to do. We need to build the power that we haven't been able to so far to stop this pipeline. I guess I would also add that, sometimes on climate, we're stuck in that really big picture and wondering if there's, anything that we can do. But right now, that is not our question. The question that I want to ask all of you on the call is, will we act? And that is what we've been scheming on here at Dogwood over the last little bit. In addition to, following all these strings where they lead us across the globe, but trying to scheme on what we can do, simple, effective, collective actions this month, no matter where you are in the province, to put some pressure on to those cabinet members, onto Adrian Dix, Tamara Davidson, and Premier Eby. And yeah, what we want to do now is get into what exactly it looks like. So I know I'm being a little bit vague on the tactics, and that is with intention. What we're going to do now is move into 3 different breakout groups based on where you are in the province. So we're going to have one breakout for Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. I will lead that one led by my colleague Savannah for folks in Victoria and the South Island. And for folks who are elsewhere across the province, you can stay where you are in this main room. And my colleague Alexandra is going to talk through the tactics that you can take all across BC over the next month in this crucial window to shut down this pipeline. So this will be about a 10-15-minute breakout to share our plan for the next 4 weeks. All right. You should see breakouts popping up on your screen now.
Janelle, are you staying in the rest of BC group, or are you going to go in the Lower Mainland group?
I'll say in the rest of BC.
All right. Well, I am in the rest of BC, so here we are.
Yeah.
It's Elizabeth here. Am I in the BC group or the rest of the
We
lower?
we are BC wide here. I'm in
Okay.
Prince George.
Oh,
Uh,
I've been there. I've been on almost every road in BC when I lived there.
Oh, here we go.
All right. Hi, everyone. A bunch of people are flowing out. So thanks, Kai and Janelle, for going to hang out with us. My name's Alexandra. I am an organizer here at Dogwood. I'm going to host this breakout room, but I'm just going to give us a few seconds. I know it takes a little while for people to find their way to, even though it's in Zoom, it can happen in the blink of an eye. It takes a little while for folks to get where they want to go on Zoom. And we'll just, stay on mute mostly, unless we have questions and stuff as we're going along. If there is anyone who's struggling to get to one of the breakout groups, though, please let us know.
if you're still here, you're in the right place. Don't worry about it.
Oh, sounds good. I'm happy with that. Not moving.
If you don't want to deal with breakout groups, I don't want to deal with it either. So
Yeah.
we'll just hang out and talk here.
This room will share things you can do wherever you are, including in Vancouver and Victoria. Christina, if you're in this room, do you want to get the slides started for this part of the breakouts? And can folks see me? Alexandra, have I been spotlighted? Are we still seeing Kai?
I have
There we
spotlighted too.
go. Perfect. And Christina, do you want to get those slides going when you get a sec?
You're muted, Christina. Or we can't hear you.
It's because my microphone is on top of my head. Let me just get my
Again.
screen
I
share
see
here. I know it
Alexandra,
happens.
but nobody else.
I don't
I'm
know
always
how to get to
snacking.
my group.
There's quite a few of us who haven't got to a group.
That's
Well,
fine.
if you are unless you live in Vancouver and Victoria, you're probably in the right place. So it's folks, we're
No,
going to have a large group here.
I live in Vancouver.
I live
All
in
right.
Colbo Hill, which is like 30K north of Victoria.
Yeah. Why don't we get you to the Victoria South Island group? So what you should have, do you still see the pop-ups on your home screen?
I didn't get any pop-ups. I got nothing.
Neither did I.
Me neither.
All right.
I'm seeing
Okay.
like 4 little squares in a little button that says breakouts. And then when
No.
I tap on that, it says join breakout room.
So you
No?
can, if you're not seeing that, you can go to the bottom of your screen and there's a little 3 dots that says more. And if you click on that, then you'll see a pop-up that gets to the little 4 boxes that said breakout rooms.
Oh,
That might
thank
get you where you want to go.
Okay, I'll
Got it.
try that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. We've been doing this 5 years now, it feels like, and it's still always a little bit of a trick to get the breakouts working smoothly. All right, let's dive in though, since we are coming up to the end. We've got an hour and a half. Thanks everyone for hanging in there over an hour and a half, but it's been, I haven't felt like people are hanging in there. It's there's lots to talk about and lots to say and lots of energy in the virtual room here. So my name's Alexandra. I am staff organizer here at Dogwood. I live on Shishal and Squamish territory here on the Sunshine Coast. And I'm going to be taking you through sort of the action plan that can be done from wherever you're in the province, including Vancouver and Victoria, if you're less into in-person action, which I know some of us are more into things we can do from where we are. So we've heard why this matters. We've heard about this urgent window, and we've talked about, why we think this kind of fact that American billionaires are behind PRGT is a really compelling argument to get the BC government to reject it. But right now we're going to talk about how you can help. And I know some folks are like fired up, ready to go. I saw that in the chat, and I imagine others are still here to learn, and that's fine. Just listen in and see how it all lands. And maybe by the end, you'll be ready to jump in. And yeah, I have a bit of a, I don't know, I heard some different levels of kind of optimism and pessimism in the chats that I've been hearing, but what I'm feeling in my world and what I'm seeing online is just this outpouring of energy and of need to take action right now in this political moment. This pool of people in my life who are not normally speaking up, they don't normally speak out about political issues, and they are doing so right now. And I think that gives us just a gigantic opportunity and really the best shot we've had and we have right now in this moment to put the brakes on this pipeline. And as Paige was saying, what that needs is more people doing it. And actually, we've had a huge response already. So Dogwood petitions and videos online, they've been getting like attention like we haven't seen in a really long time, which is another indicator of just how much people are tracking this and want to take action on this. But what we need to do is convert those eyeballs, the people kind of seeing it, into the people taking action. That's what we are looking for your help to do. So in terms of taking action yourself and encouraging the people in your life to do the same. So, Christina, maybe you want to head to the next slide. We're launching this month of action to provide those opportunities. And I'm going to walk through them now, but don't worry about taking notes. Don't worry about writing them down, copying links. We're going to send you an email tomorrow with your first mission, which I'm going to tell you about in a moment, and also throughout the course of the month with future actions. And each week until April, we're going to be offering these action opportunities, and each one builds on the next and builds our power and the pressure on the government. Next slide. And I just want to be, clear about, we're doing our best to get all of this kind of squeezed in over the course of March, because we're expecting a decision from the minister as early as April. Doesn't mean that pressure after that isn't useful. We've even heard that there could be delays because the pressure that's out there has been working, but we're building this so that we get the pressure in while it counts, while those kind of decisions and conversations are going on. So we're here at kind of step one, if you will. Sorry, I'm getting these notifications that are really bugging me. Anyway, I'm trying to get those turned off for you. First step is write a letter to Minister Davidson, who is our official decision maker. And I'm guessing if you are here tonight, you've probably already done that. So we're not going to get into that too much. But that is a way to just lodge your basic level of concern. Send a message to the minister on our website. We've got an easy tool to do that. I will pop the link in the chat here. And that is like the very first step you can take. We're thinking of that as sort of step 0, if you will. However, what we really are excited about is that moving on to step 2, which is making a phone call. And we know over the years, we've heard that a phone call to a minister's office counts, tenfold to an email. And we have a brand new tool that we are launching tonight that makes it really easy to do so. And Christina, we're just going to go through the next slide now. I'm just going to walk you through it. I'm not going to do it right now because our office is closed. But in the morning, you'll get a link to this action on a tool on our website that's going to allow you to put in your information over there on the left and click make the call, and you'll be patched through to Adrian Dix, who, from what we understand, is really the core decision maker here. Davidson is the official decision maker, but Dix is sort of the power behind the throne, if you will. So we've chosen to go for Adrian Dix as the key person we want to reach out to. And it's a little bit, I just wanted to, what you do, you fill in your info on the left, and once you click make the call, you will get, your phone will ring, and then your phone rings, you answer it, and then you will be connected through to Minister Davidson's office. So you want to have your talking points ready first before you click that make the call button. And do you want to just head on to the next slide, Christina? Those calling tips the kind of tips for, and the things you might want to say, which we've prepared for you, will show up on the next page. But I'd actually just practice or write them down yourself. It really helps to build confidence in making these kinds of calls. You want to head on to the next slide. You're just going to want to say who you are, your name, where you're calling from. You probably will be leaving a voicemail or talking to staff. He doesn't answer his own phone, but be prepared with what you'd like to say. We've written them out for you. You'll get them, they'll be right there for you. But I actually think the most important thing is to say why you personally care about this project. So your name, you're a resident of BC, you live here, and you're calling today because you oppose PRGT because. We can't answer that for you. There's been a lot of reasons that have been shared here tonight about why this is important. It's personal, but I would love you all to take a moment now maybe to share 1 or 2 reasons in the chat. And there's a reason for that, which is that our next step is around activating our friends, and thinking through why we care about this is really an important precursor to reaching out to our friends and family. So anyone want to share a reason or 2 in the chat there about what they would say? What would be the first thing that they would say on a voicemail if they were making a phone call about why they are concerned about this pipeline? And if folks aren't ready to do that right now, that's fine. We will just roll right on. But I do thank you, Lori. There we go. It's speaking from the heart. Speaking our truth is truly what is more compelling than, rehashing the talking points we've given for you, but we've given the ones that we think are the most compelling to the decision makers. So the next step is going to be activating your network. And this really, I think, is the most critical thing. This is how we grow our power and pressure. And, if everyone in this call makes a call, that's awesome. But if we each has 5 friends, that's 5 times the power. And that's the kind of numbers that we're going to need to start cutting through. Can you go to the next slide, please, Christina? So we're asking you to activate your community, to make a list of your friends, your family members, your coworkers, your neighbors, whoever you think you might be able to chat to about this. And remember, I would find this very different to do now than I would have to talk about something more climate related. There are more people I can think of right now who I could reach out to about this than I would under normal circumstances. And then it's just about reaching out to them via whatever method you think they're going to listen to, whether that's a text, a phone call, a social media message, and ask them to join you in taking action and sending a letter or making a phone call. And I'm going to do a little mini training now. I know it can feel odd making an ask like this, and we are going to obviously send you a resource to do this with, like, some tips, a sample text, sample email messages to try out. And I just want to move on to the next slide, Christina, and offer you, this little framework that I find super helpful. It's classic organizing framework. That's just a really basic way to think about how to make a compelling conversation with your friend. You want to make the ask as specific you can, and you want to make it based on your personal connection to them. So it's not generic, it's personal. You want to explain why it matters, why it's urgent, there's an opportunity here. You want to be really clear about what you're asking, so that you've challenged yourself to end the conversation or the message with a specific ask. Will you make a phone call? And then if they're keen, if they're excited, let's always grow our power by asking them to do one step further. Will they also join you in asking 5 friends? So that's a teeny tiny little tips from the organizing world. And a bonus point is following up. Again, from the organizing world, 90% of organizing is follow-up. So if you don't hear back to your text, send one a few days later, and that's what it's going to take often to get people taking action. So I've got a couple more I want to move us along to, but is anyone sitting right now with any burning questions that they wanted to share before we talk through our last couple steps? All right, I know we're running a tiny bit later and I'm not seeing any in the chat there, so I'm just going to keep going along.
I would like to ask something. I don't know how. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi. You said to write to Tamara and Davidson.
Yes.
And Adrian Dix is the power broker. Is that a contradiction, or do you really mean to call Tamara Davidson?
No, so we have an email writing tool that sends a message to several of them, including Minister Davidson and Minister Dix. And so that will reach several decision makers, several other key cabinet ministers as well. But we know that we'll get, not quite as many people doing the phone call. So we really wanted to prioritize the one who, through conversations with, folks who are, all kinds of different people. And, this has been well reported in news outlets as well, that, Adrian Dix is really the power holder in this situation, and that he's likely to be the one. And I'm going to see another question, so I'm just going to move on about how about to my MLA. So we're going to move on to that because that is the next step. So Christina, next slide. So step 3, again, you don't need to worry about all this. We're going to keep sending you these opportunities, but the step 3 is take it to your MLA. So we have a 2-week dates when MLAs are back in their ridings for a constituency break, and that is coming up in March. And it's a really great time to take the message directly to your MLA. I'm just getting a little message that our time is nearly up. So Davidson and Dix are the deciders, but MLAs out in their ridings are these listing posts. So if they're bringing things back to caucus, we're going to hear they're going to be reporting back that there's this flood of concern. So we're going to send you a template with how to write a personal email, how to send, drop it off. That's the very best thing you could do, is actually take it into their office while they're there, or, make a phone call to your MLA's office. So this is another really important and useful way to amp up the message. And then our final bonus actions are 2. One is to really host an event. Get your friends together, do a letter writing party or a phone calling party together yourselves in person. Taking action together beats doing it alone every single time. We have someone who's already stepped up to host something like this in Sea to Sky country in Pemberton. He's getting his friends together at the pub. He's made a partnership with a local group, and he's going to kind of share this information out with some support from us and some tips. And that's something any one of you can do as well, and we can support you to do. And we'll kind of offer out some resources for that as well. You want to just head to the next slide there, Christina? So bonus number 1 is hosting an event, and bonus number 2 is inviting your friends and family to action in Vancouver. So maybe you and Victoria, that's what they're talking about right now in the other breakouts, is a whole bunch of in-person things that are going on over the next month. If you live there or you will be visiting there, you have friends and family who are there, feel free to invite them. That would be fantastic. And we'll make sure to share how to do that. If you know you're going to be there right now, there's a specific page for Vancouver and Victoria folks to sign up for these in-person opportunities that I've just popped in the chat there. And that is your step, your final step, your final bonus action. So I'm rushing along a little bit here. Always, as ever, we start to get a little crunch for time. We want to respect folks' time. But what I really want to share is that this can work. You know, if everyone on this call does these things, ask 10's friends, some of them do the same, we can hit our goal of 15,000 letters and 1,000 phone calls. We are 2/3 of the way there already. It can happen.
Who are doing it? Okay.
We just got a couple folks maybe coming in here. I do want to share that there's some just folks, if they want to mute so we're not distracting each other. My final kind of moment there is that this is like a political moment like none we've seen in years, and that there are these, it's called a moment of a whirlwind, where we're all paying attention to the same thing, and we can really use that and jump on it and make something different happen. I know a lot of us are skeptical about the government doing the right thing on issues like this, but I think we're in new territory and we do have opportunities that we didn't have before. And that only works if you jump on board. So that's what we're excited to do with you.
Say again.
So we're going to head back. Our friends in the other two breakout rooms are going to be joining us in just a little bit for some final questions. But while we wait for them, feel free to pop in with questions in the chat or come off mute and ask them now. I'll do my best to answer. I think we have Kai and Janelle here too, who can chime in if it's more for them.
I want to say that our MLA here in Haida Gwaii is Tamara Davidson. I met her and she said, I'm your MLA. I'm not talking as the minister. She makes the distinction. So I have no idea where she stands. So I don't know how to approach her on that.
Yeah. Josette, is it? I'm just seeing, I found you there. We would really love to work with you to try and arrange a meeting or do something in Haida Gwaii, because I think it's so important that she hears, you know, from exactly where you live. So I will make a note of your name. We'll be in touch after, because we'd love to help and support you to really shape up the right thing to work for her.
Alexandra, my name's Donna. I live in Prince Rupert, and I and my partner have met with Tamara over this in Prince Rupert, and I would be happy to be, I have some insights. I'd be happy to be contacted with that.
Wonderful. I'm just going to put my email in here so I don't miss you, because I'm not seeing.
Can you say again what time it is on Saturday, the art bit?
Oh, I think we're getting our friends back now. So just to finish up in the main room, there were 2 people in Haida Gwaii who are willing to help with Tamara Davidson. So if you could just email me your contact details, we'll follow up with you directly. And I'm just dropping in the chat again there.
Well, we've got a moment, Alexandra. Paige put a link to the letter, so we could get everybody on the call to send a letter right while we're here. Thank you.
Alexandra, I think you're muted.
I was going to hand back to you. I was like, we could, but I'm handing back to Molly to wrap us up, because we're coming up to the end of our hour and we've got a little wrap up planned, and then we'll see about who might like to hang back after that.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandra. Oh, sorry. I'm getting some feedback, or maybe someone's off mute. I'm just going to. All right, so thank you guys so much. Thank you for being here still. And I hope the breakouts went well and that everyone's feeling super energized to keep taking action against PRGT this month. So yes, as was mentioned during the breakout groups, your first mission tomorrow morning is to call, or at any time, is to call Energy Minister Adrian Dix. You'll be receiving an email with a tool to do that tomorrow morning. You'll also be receiving a follow-up email with further links and resources, and you can actually expect weekly emails the whole month of action until April. And just a reminder that there will be in-person organizing events in Vancouver and Victoria that you can sign up for at the link in the chat. Speaking of links in the chat, we're going to drop a bunch of them down there. Follow Dogwood on social media. We're on Instagram and TikTok and Blue Sky. Follow Janelle. And finally, as Kai mentioned, there is truly unbelievable work happening on the ground up north. Not just the acute work of resisting the pipeline, but also the long-term work of practicing and teaching Gitxsan culture. So follow these Gitxsan and Gitniao-led accounts that will also be dropped into the chat for on-the-ground updates. I'd like to extend a final thank you to our speakers, Janelle and Kai. You guys are both absolute powerhouses. And thank you so much to everyone on the call tonight. It's 7 p.m. on a Monday. You're spending like 2 extra hours on your computer screens with us, and we're so appreciative. I know it's not quite the same as being together in person, but my heart still feels warm right now, and I hope all of your hearts do too. And just to finish us off here, I would love to ask everyone to raise their hands up if you're ready to take action against PRGT this month, whether that's sending an email or making a call or sharing a post or whatever. I actually meant like your real hands, not the, unless those are questions. Like your real hands in to your video, and Paige or someone will take a screenshot and we'll just get a nice little depiction here of all these beautiful people ready to take action against this boondoggle of a pipeline. So just keep them up. 1, 2, 3. Screenshot time. Leaving some time for screenshotting. And yay.
There's so many. There's
So
6
many.
pages. How do I capture them all? You're beautiful, wonderful. Keep smiling. It's still going. There's more. You're incredible. Here we go. Page 5. Page 6. You look great. Thank you all so much. All right. Good to go, Molly. Back to you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, we're done for tonight. If anyone has any questions or anything else, we have a few more minutes. We can stay on for a little bit longer, but we are past time.
I can stick around for another 10 minutes if folks have more questions.
All right, we got Kai. Another 10 minutes. Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's really inspiring and heartwarming to see this kind of turnout on a call on a Monday night. It's great.
We had
I'll
like
just hop
200
up
people.
to thank Molly. Thank you, Molly, for hosting us and carrying us all through. And yeah, for those who have to hop off at 7, please feel free. This is the wrap to the call here. We'll be sending you out everything in the morning. Goodbye, everyone. And for anyone who wants to hang on tight, a few of us will stick out behind.
Oh, yes. And thank you. Molly's been very modest, but if you want to go see her take down Trump, Pierre Poilievre, and the American billionaires, head to our Instagram page or TikTok account, where I'm told there are some informative and entertaining videos to watch.
So they're really great. And that was one thing I was asking, because so many of us are not young and we would love to see these Instagram things on something that we can access. Because a lot of people I know are not on Facebook, not on Instagram, not on any of those platforms, but they understand YouTube. And so if I share, people can actually see them and they are remarkable. Like they're great. But I know some people, when I share the link, they say, well, can't go there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Molly.
That's a really great point, Lori, and we are working on it. YouTube has been at the top of mind for us on the comms team, and we know it's much more accessible as a platform, especially for people that don't have accounts on Instagram and TikTok. It's super janky to work with those links, so we are working on that, and you can expect to see our videos on YouTube soon.
Okay, thanks, because I need that too. I need you. I don't do Instagram. I don't do any social media, so I appreciate.
And seniors are a really important cohort, and the Seniors for Climate is organizing, and we actually do a lot of mobilizing, and we want more younger people, but it's the older cohort who vote and who will like talk to their elected leaders, and it is hard to reach them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And in Winnipeg, we had a thing last fall, Seniors for Climate.
Yeah, there's some really great mobilization of seniors that's going on. I know Bill McKibben started like the third act to mobilize seniors. It's a super important cohort in this movement.
Yeah, and when you look at the breakdown of like who is most mad about the American takeover, it's folks my parents' age, right? Frighteningly, the younger folks, especially men, are more ambivalent, and I think it's partly because they just haven't lived through some of Wall Street's worst excesses and the American wars in the early 2000s. But yeah, if you're old enough to remember Iraq, if you're old enough to remember the last big Wall Street financial crash, these are not the people we want running our country.
And the subprime mortgages. Don't forget the subprime mortgages in 2008.
Yes,
And
exactly, which Blackstone profited off of by buying up, no joke, they bought up hundreds of thousands of homes, and they are now America's biggest landlord is the company that is proposing this pipeline. They bought homes after people defaulted on their mortgages, and they now rent them out to hundreds of thousands of families in the States.
I'm looking on Instagram to find Dogwood, but I don't find it.
Dogwood BC is our handle.
Oh, okay.
Ampersand Dogwood BC. Thank you, Paige.
Ampersand? What's
Arrobas, if you prefer. At
Like
symbol.
what? At symbol.
The at symbol.
Thank you. I've never heard
Okay,
ampersand.
Dogwood what? Dogwood?
Dogwood BC. All one word.
If I could just jump in, thank you so much, Janelle and Kai. I would just love to know.
Okay, got it.
Would love to know your hot take answer for family members or people in our circles who might say, well, these energy projects are essential for our national security, given the Trump threat. What would you say back to that?
Handing control of strategic energy corridors to the billionaires that are puppeteering Trump right now is the stupidest possible thing we could do for our national security, and making them filthy rich on top of it adds insult to injury.
Perfect. Thank you.
I mean, just think about it. The idea of Trump's closest advisors controlling not just those pipeline corridors, but all of the hydro infrastructure to power them is a deeply scary prospect if you care about our ability to make choices about our own future, also called sovereignty. Whether you're an Indigenous hereditary government, elected government, or BC's provincial government, handing over that control of energy and the entire economy to American billionaires is just crazy.
I'll just jump in and add that there's a yes to this too, right? That's not the way to do it. Standing up to Trump is not going to be done through fast tracking this pipeline. Building renewable energy here in BC that we control locally is. So that would be what I would say to folks who might respond differently to one side of that or the other.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got
Karen?
here late. I would like to know if there's a good article I can send people about the fact that who owns this pipeline.
You should sign up to our newsletter if you haven't yet, because we're posting weekly blogs there and on our website. There's actually not a ton of reporting yet about all of the American billionaires backing this pipeline, but we're on it. So I'll send you a link to our blog right now in the chat.
Okay, I need for my more conservative friends, I need something that looks very official.
You could, yeah, we can send you a couple links. There's Stefan Labe did a piece about germanium and how BC could hold back this critical mineral from the United States, which they need for night vision goggles and other military applications. And in that article, he included a long section on the pipelines and the opposition that we're starting to see in polling. I'll just dig it up right now and I'll post it in the chat.
Oh, I'm not even good enough to do chat. I'm not sure if I have my chat up.
Okay, if you look at...
But you have my email address because, you know, you sent me
let me
this
see if
link.
True.
So...
Okay, if you Google PRGT Blackstone poll, that might get you the news article you're looking for.
Thanks.
Hey, Ty. Stood on the same ground with you up at Wet'suwet'en a few times, and I wonder if you can say what we learned there that we could be sharpening our focus with on the PRGT.
Yeah, thank you. That's an incredible question, and I think it warrants its own discussion. I'd love to hear more from some of the Wet'suwet'en land defenders. But the biggest lesson I took away from that experience is you have to get on this early. You have to shut them down early. Once they get financing, it gets incredibly difficult. And once they start moving machines in and they can get an injunction and then bring in the police, you're fighting a real uphill battle. So the good news is with PRGT, none of that has happened yet. And I think we are at the point where we could affect the ability of the project to get a final investment decision. And without saying too much, I was in Japan and Korea last month meeting with some of those investors, and there is some real skepticism right now in the Asian financial industry towards LNG projects in North America because of the massive cost overruns on projects like Coastal GasLink, which was because of the resistance from the Wet'suwet'en. So even if our political leaders are not thinking logically about these things, I have some confidence that the people investigating risk for some of the bigger financial institutions in Asia are starting to pay attention. And this is the moment to be amplifying that risk and that doubt because they haven't yet pulled the trigger on the investment.
Excellent. Thank you.
Janelle, you mentioned some of this in your talk, but for family members, people in our circles who say, well, if we're opposing any of these projects, we are opposing Indigenous sovereignty and the decisions of certain nations. How would you help us navigate those conversations?
Yeah, I would ask, why the nations that support the projects, why are we prioritizing those over the dozens of other nations whose territories these projects affect? Yeah, I have a piece in the narwhal and a piece in the breach on economic reconciliation and kind of where the term came from and how it's been used that might be useful. But yeah, I would just bring up some of the information about how that consent is manufactured and that we need another economic vision for these communities. And I think, yeah, getting people excited about that being renewable energy that can secure some energy sovereignty right now is really motivating.
I have a really dark tidbit to share, which is that General David Petraeus, who's a partner at KKR that owns the pipeline, he has his own definition of reconciliation, and it comes from when they were trying to when they invaded Iraq and were faced with a bunch of hostile tribes. Reconciliation just means paying off hostile tribes not to shoot at you. That's the U.S. military definition, and that's the mindset of the private equity companies that own Coastal GasLink and are trying to build PRGT. Reconciliation to them is just an exercise in buying off your opponents.
I'm seeing a hand up from Karen. Thanks for your patience. Did you have a question? Oh, you're on mute.
It's a tech thing, Kai. My question was for you. Thanks. I'm part of the 410 cohort who opposed sellout 4 decades ago, 5, 6, 7 decades ago. But I'm curious about the lobbying of an MLA and when it comes to party whip, whether there's any hope there.
Well, as a former political reporter, I can say that party whips have only gotten more powerful, and that is true within the BC NDP as much as, actually, ironically, I would say the BC Conservative whip has less power than the BC NDP right now. Basically, if you hold power, if you're in government, the incentive to discipline your MLAs and stop them from from getting out of line is very, very strong. And the level of lobbying, both formal and informal, legal and illegal, by the pipeline industry on this has been just overwhelming. And so, unfortunately, I don't believe that most of our politicians are going to make decisions on this out of common sense or having their eyes open to the facts. I think they make a lot of political decisions based on fear. And basically, we have to be able to convince them that this is a liability, that this is a political liability to be seen siding with Trump and the billionaire class in the United States right now. That is a failure to read the room. And the economic consequences for British Columbians, the rise in gas bills that we are already seeing to pay for LNG and pipelines, I think ultimately that is one of the most potent arguments that we have in order to hit those MLAs right in the lizard brain and remind them that, you know, people's energy bills going up, that's what causes governments to lose power. And doing that to yourself, shooting yourself in the foot for the benefit of Trump and his billionaire friends, would be the stupidest possible way to lose government.
Thank you. I'll rely on those talking points that we're going to get, because I think I can only go for 1 point to an MLA. So if I'm going on PR, I can't talk about this. And I'd like to reverse the order this week, but that's why I was curious. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dogwood. Yes.
Thanks,
Karen.
I want to maybe lift up a question under the chat that came up to you, Kai and Janelle. So if we write our ministers and our MLAs, what about the investors? How do we reach them? Are there letter writing tools for banks? Is that maybe part of the strategy to thwart that investment? And Kai, I thought maybe you could start off a little on
Janelle,
that.
you might have more to say on this, but we've seen some really incredible work from colleagues at Change Course, at oh goodness, the Yinta Access, the Gidimden clan and their supporters have done really incredible work targeting private equity firms, insurance companies, banks, and pension funds. However, the reason we know who to target is because they already made that investment in Coastal GasLink, and our efforts have been retroactive. What we are trying to do right now is identify the likely lenders to PRGT, and we don't have a solid enough shortlist to share that right now. But based on Coastal GasLink, we can make some pretty educated guesses. And basically, we were talking about banks in Japan, banks in the US, and banks in Canada. And there's only so many that are still willing to lend this amount of money to new fossil fuel projects. And so we can create a pretty good shortlist. And as we get more intelligence from the industry and from friends who are studying the financial sector, we do see value in directly targeting those financial institutions. We just need to whittle the list down a little bit.
Thanks, Kai. How about Cassidy? Did you want to ask a question? Maybe one of our last ones for the night.
Oh, that's all good. Hi, and I deeply apologize. I guess I was I sent a question earlier, but at first, I originally directed it to Janelle, but then I realized I had to send it to everyone, and now I guess I'm worried of just being a bit of a nuisance. But I kind of asked a question, even though it's not specifically regarded to the pipeline itself. I guess I'm just curious on the thoughts of eco-misanthropy, and especially when it includes Indigenous people. I'm very sure Janelle probably read the message but couldn't answer it in time, which is all good. But I guess I'm just kind of curious on those thoughts, but I also want to make sure I'm not taking up too much time, if that makes sense.
Can you just define eco-misanthropy for those of us who might not know the word?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry. I guess I was also going to say, yeah, sorry. People might not know what eco-misanthropy is, but that's kind of the general term I've been using to describe of like when back in 2020, a lot of people saying nature is healing, humans are parasites, that kind of thing. And I feel like it gets rid of the Indigenous narrative of how people on the land have sustained forests, oceans, various different types of environments for centuries. And to see this kind of narrative being pushed is really disheartening, especially I am actually a Métis person in Alberta who has really seen this a lot, and it's just heartbreaking. And there's several different facts that can go against this narrative, but I think Indigenous people are also very important to push back against of what I've been seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Cassidy. I'll repost what you sent in the chat so people can read it. Yeah, I hate this narrative, but I also understand why people were saying it. And I think a lot of people who have been, yeah, doing this kind of work for a long time sometimes get frustrated and feel that, yeah, this is the result of all of humanity's inherent badness and greed. And yeah, I think you've already touched on it. I think that discounts the fact that in this country, we've had hundreds and hundreds of nations that have survived and governed on these lands sustainably. And yeah, it also, takes the power away from everyday working people that are concerned about this issue if we really believe that humankind is inherently bad in the problem. And so I think, yeah, the work that we did on this call and continue to do is just to make sure that we're calling out those billionaires and the people that are behind driving these projects and driving the climate crisis. Yeah, when I saw that COVID, I had many long think pieces on Twitter about why I disagree with those statements. So thanks for asking the question.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'll probably follow you, I guess, on like social media to the best I can. So I definitely appreciate your your thoughts and of just all the work that you do, even though I've only come to know you in such a short amount of time. But again, I deeply appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to jive on the subject anytime. I love humans. That's what I replied to you and say.
Yes.
I really love humans, and I do this work not just because I love land, but I love humans and believe in humans. And so I think we can forefront that in this this campaign to stop this thing as well.
Also, all the most
you all
beautiful and
again.
abundant landscapes that we can think of have been stewarded by human beings for thousands of years, right? You don't just abandon something that you love. All of the places that we love are like that because they were stewarded and shaped and tended by people for thousands of years. And you don't have to be Indigenous to love land and to feel the love from the land. I will say that. Yeah, I don't think it's about dividing people into different racial categories. It's about finding a relationship to the place that we live that is reciprocal and loving.
Kai, the CanLit were very successful in boycotting the Bank of Nova Scotia. Is there any link through journalistic ones now that might be able to band together to put the kind of support that, resistance that CanLit brought?
That's an interesting question. I will mull that more. I will say this is a great moment for unlikely allies. We are seeing such a broad mobilization of people who, regardless of our political differences, do not want to have our future determined for us by unelected American billionaires. And if we can agree on that, we can have the other arguments later, I think, about what is best for this country and what reconciliation looks like moving forward. But I think if we can agree on the fact that we don't want Trump and his crew calling the shots, then we can pull in some allies who have been totally silent on oil and gas issues up until now. And yeah, authors and journalists might be people in that category worth thinking about.
And I guess we won't find them in the police unions, will we?
Unlikely. Yeah, not to wade into Vancouver politics, but please don't vote for the police union guy. All right.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Hi, Kai, can I ask a question?
Go for it.
I don't know if anybody here has heard about there's a YouTube fellow, I've forgotten his name. I think it's Matthew something. He does a YouTube thing called Energy Media. And he did a piece where he talked about a research organization in Alberta that was actively researching alternative uses for bitumen rather than burning them. And that they had come up with a way to create a carbon fiber from bitumen so it would not be burned and it would not release the carbon into the air, but could still, at least people still have some jobs. And the Danielle Smith government shut down that whole agency when she came to power. So does anyone know anything about that?
I think you're referring to Markham Hislop. He's an independent journalist that runs Energy Media. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big nerd about this stuff, but I'm not as big of a nerd as Markham. So yeah, go check out Energy Media on YouTube. It's Energy with an I, and he's done some great original reporting on.
He also says there's no economic case for this. The only way that pipelines are going to get built in Canada is at the public purse. And that
we've already seen that to be true with Trans Mountain.
And so that's how you can explain it to any conservative friends that people may have that are fiscal conservatives, is to say, well, look, where is all the big energy companies coming with their proposals that don't involve taxpayer funding?
Yeah, that's a great point, Teresa, and that's why I called PRGT the last of the dinosaurs, because nobody would propose a project of this nature in today's investment climate.
Yeah.
I need to run. I got to head back upstairs at the hospital pretty soon here. But if folks have other questions.
What was that YouTube guy?
His name is Markham Hislop. And the channel is called Energy Media, energy spelt with an I instead of a Y.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Christina. If folks have more questions, I'm totally happy to have you email me. I'm just kai@dogwoodbc.ca. I'm not going to give out Janelle's contact info, but you can find her on social media pretty easily.
Amazing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for sticking around, Kai, and thank you everyone for also sticking around. Literally dozens of you at 7:30. It's amazing. But yeah, we're gonna end this here now to respect everyone's time. And yeah, thank you so much again.